Hey there. So I was saying, I started directing for Kirk Players when I was 16 because my dad really needed somebody for a summer workshop. Then I spent 35 years as a high school theater director and teacher, and I'm going to talk to you today about directing. Um, as many people have already said, the director needs to read the script backwards, forwards, like the back of their hand, and research. There's all kinds of research: the type of the play, the style of the play, the author, the time period. You have to know more than anybody on the company. I think directors need to have supervision. That two different things. One, they have to have a really clear vision of what they want to do with the script, make out of this production. And then supervision, they need to have a really good eye on everybody else and what they're doing on the production. From the first start at auditions, seeing that everybody there gets a fair shake, etc., all through the production. The play needs to talk to the director. By that I mean the director should read it and start getting flooded with images, ideas, excited about producing it. Sometimes in our new version of the Kirk Players, that's a little hard because we pick the season, then we pick the directors and assign them to the play, whether it's talking to them or not. So hopefully they'll read it over quite a few times until it does talk to them. The one main function of the director is to unify all other elements of the play. They have to make sure that every separate working designer, tech crew, all the actors, everything is in harmony and working towards the vision that the director has. The job gets broken down into three parts, basically. One, the director has to interpret the script for the entire company. If the actor doesn't understand why these lines are there, if the set designer doesn't understand what's necessary here in the set, if the costumer has questions about colors, etc., whatever it is, it's up to the director to interpret the script and answer all the questions for everybody. Second, they have to choose the mode of production, the way it's going to be produced. Are we going to do this in the round? Are we going to do it in a thrust? Are we going to use the accents or not? Are we going to change the time period? I once had a great time with a Romeo and Juliet at Mundelein High School, where we put it into a futuristic world, and everything was jagged and wicked and nasty, and we called it Romeo and Juliet Mad Max version, based on the old Mel Gibson movies, and had a great time with that. It's sometimes in choosing the mode of production, the director might find ways or the desire to break the fourth wall, put people in the audience, bring the audience up on stage. We did Trial of Goldilocks and filled the entire jury box with people that put their names in at the back of the theater when they came in to be the jury. The third part of the job is to prepare for production. That basically covers everything, the work you do in rehearsals, in all of the meetings that you have to attend and take care of, and all your homework. There's a lot of homework for directors. You need to prepare very well for auditions. You need to create a welcoming letter that explains the rehearsal schedule, all the expectations you have in mind. When you prepare the description of characters and the world of the play as you see it, it's good to sometimes say that the player descriptions are not set in stone. And it's often very valuable for the director to stay very open-minded as they go into auditions. I can't tell you the number of times that I had a very clear idea of what I wanted for a certain character, and then someone did something so special and unique in auditions that was very much different, and I liked that better. Make sure that everyone at auditions gets a very fair chance, whenever possible, unless you have a very tiny, tiny turnout, make use of the callback system, where a much smaller group that you really want to hear again is taken away from the larger group that came to the open call. Prepare sheets ahead of time for your auditions. Have scenes selected and all the characters listed, so when you're calling people, all you have to do is fill in the name of the actor you're reading, and it'll help things go much faster and more efficiently. Use every minute of your time. Remember, any time spent saying, well, I know I'm going to use Peter and Gretchen, but I'm going to read them here anyway, like added rehearsal time. Use it. Casting is 90% of good directing. It's so incredibly important. If you are a mediocre director, but you cast really well, you're going to have a good show. If you're a very good director and you make mistakes in casting, you probably are going to have problems. Try to keep everybody that auditioned in on the production somewhere. Look at them for possibly staff. Look for using understudies. Certainly fill out the needs we have for all of our wonderful technical crews. Once you're cast and the directing staff is decided, that's the assistant director, stage manager, assistant stage manager, tech director, the entire company comes in and sits down for the first read through. The director needs to make all of his or their directions forward clear to people. There are 4 phases to rehearsal after the read through. The first and one of the longest sections of the rehearsal schedule is blocking the show. Blocking is the large scale movement patterns, standing, sitting, enter, exit, crossing the stage. Most of the time, those are given to the actors from the director. Stage business are much smaller levels of stage movement, usually created by the actor, but the director often has ideas or can help them find their stage business, twiddling their mustache, tapping on a table, smoking a cigarette, whatever. They often are the patterns that help delineate the character. Take the time to get your blocking really right. It's such a waste of time if you're 3, 4, 5 weeks into it and you start having problems with the blocking then. Make sure that your entire staff is writing down the same blocking for you, the AD, the M, and the ASM. It's great. Almost everything in theater has a checks and balance system. And when it comes to blocking, the actor should be writing it down with pencil as soon as they're given. And then the AD, SM, ASM all should have it down so that no matter who is there or not there, somebody can get it clear. During the blocking section, the actors are memorizing, and using pencil to mark in their blocking, as I mentioned. The second step in the rehearsal schedule is called working rehearsals. That's where moments of the play are worked over and over and over again until they're really good, maybe even perfect. Helping actors work up an emotional moment, working out really difficult, crazy pieces of the blocking, whatever's needed, but working on them till they're right. Then the third section is called run rehearsals. That's where you keep the rehearsal running, acts, scenes, eventually the entire play without any interruption, even if there's slight mistakes, so that you can evaluate where the problems are. The actors get a sense of continuity in their character, and they have a final chance after you've been stopping and starting beforehand to work on the emotional builds and movements in their characters. This section requires a lot of coaching from the director. I'm sorry, that belonged to the working rehearsals, a lot of coaching, sorry. Last, of course, is the tech rehearsals, where all of the tech crews are added to bring their magic to the production. You have to remember that by the time you get to tech rehearsals, you really have to give the technicians, the designers and technicians, the time they need to do their job. The actors may have had 6, 8, 7, whatever weeks to get ready. I always tell the actors, your job must be finished when you start production week, because that's when we have to turn things over to our technicians, and they deserve priority. When you set up your rehearsal schedule, I always suggest, a lot of this is suggestion, not law. I always suggest that you break the script down into individual actions. They're little pieces of the show, sometimes even as small as a page, 3 pages, 5 pages, often based largely on entrances and exits that let you know exactly who is needed where, so that you can develop the most efficient rehearsal schedule possible and be able to work well around conflicts. When you set up your rehearsal schedule, always figure 1 hour for every page of the script. So the average full-length play is about 90 pages. Could be 80, could be 120. It averages 90 pages. So you need 90 hours of rehearsal. When I was teaching high school, that was easy. That translated to 6 weeks times 5 days a week times 3 hours of rehearsal, 90 hours. With Kirk Players, it's a different animal because we only rehearse 3 days a week. There was a time years and years ago, we only rehearsed 2 days a week. This is better, but that means a much longer span of starting and ending your rehearsals. A good director must be a master of stage pictures. Stage pictures is breaking down the flowing action on the stage into individual pictures, individual moments. It's almost like seeing the play as an old-fashioned film with all these individual shots, and in your mind, you try to see it one single shot at a time and evaluate if in that moment, in that shot, is it exactly right for focus, balance, dominance? Is it saying everything I needed to say? And if you're an experienced director, you start learning to be able to do that in your mind and not have to stop very often. But sometimes for very complicated scenes, it's absolutely fine to just yell, hey, yo, stop for a minute, and freeze your actors so you can evaluate for all these different things in this moment as it moves to this moment to this moment. A good director must develop a natural sense of the sight lines. Once you get to the stage, there's a delineation, a boundary line on each side that determines what the entire audience can see or what only part of the audience can see. And when you're with Kirk Players in the church basement, you have to try very hard to have that delineation already in your mind as you block in the church basement, so you can make an easy transition to the high school stage and you've not blocked anybody in a bad sightline position. It's a personal choice whether you want to pre-block a scene or not. Pre-blocking is just doing all the deciding and writing down of the blocking before you get to rehearsal. Times when this is a plus is when the director's vision is very, very particular, or when you don't have much time. If you want to save time, pre-block the show at home. Or if you feel like your cast is younger or less experienced and you don't feel like they have their own strength of instincts to kind of follow the blocking in the script and find their own way. Those are the times when pre-blocking is a plus. Negative, really good actors, don't like being told, do this. This is your blocking. They like to find it, but then it's also very, very valuable in enormous large scenes with 20, 25 people at the hanging, etc., blah, blah, blah. Or when the thing is very, very complicated. If you've got 20 actors in a scene, 14 actors, and it's very complicated, you don't want to walk in rehearsal and go, oh, let's see, what do we want to do here? No, you want to get that figured out on paper at home and save time in rehearsal. Many directors prefer to block in rehearsal and use the actors right in front of them. That's absolutely fine, especially for experienced directors and if you're working with experienced actors. Personally, I like to watch the actors' instincts at first before making firm decisions on blocking. That's a personal thing with me. Most of the time, nothing's set in stone. Remember, you can use the stage directions written in the script or not. They came from the author and the first stage manager that did the biggest production on Broadway, etc. If you don't use them, make sure you evaluate why they're there before you eliminate them. Another valuable concept is the director as an audience of one. It centers on the director remaining very objective when they watch rehearsals, especially late in the game, and tech rehearsals, when things are really coming together. To come in and pretend that they've never seen it before and try to evaluate every moment, every picture, every movement, everything as the audience will see it. You block that scene, but will the audience understand what that blocking means if they don't know the show? You help that actor work on that emotional build. Will the audience understand where it's coming from if they don't know the script ahead of time? The audience of one. There are many tricks to control focus. One of your main jobs as a director. Number one, movement. Your eyes naturally follow something that moves. So use movement to control focus. Number two, sound. You want to make sure that an important line is heard from a character who's all the way on the other side of the stage. Have them laugh or cough or sigh loudly before they speak. All the eyes will turn to them and then they'll hear the line. There's a whole bunch of tricks like that. I'm not going through a bunch of them. In analysis, tell me when to stop or something, you guys, because I'm just going here. I got like a minute or two left. Great. In analysis, the director has to know the four main points of the conflict curve. It starts with the inciting incident. That's the action that starts the conflict. It moves to the crisis point where everything gets turned on a direct path to the ending. It hits up with the crisis. No, I lied. Crisis was first. Climax, which is where it reaches its highest point of action, but also stops. The conflict ends. And then some plays have, and many plays don't, have the fourth level, and that's called denouement. And that's action that is after the climax, often tying up loose ends and telling the rest of the story, but not advancing conflict at all. Notes given to the actors must be very clear. It's best to have the actors write them down so they can refer to them and work on them. Try to learn to tell which notes can be written down and given, and which notes need to be stopped in rehearsal and worked out right that moment. Balance criticism with praise. Some notes are much better given in private. Make good use of your directing staff. Help clarify their assignments. Make sure everyone is using the same stage shorthand to mark blocking. Talking about the assistant director. They need to know the show as well as the director. They need to know the director's goals and vision exceptionally well. And after that, they largely have to do whatever the director needs the most, whether it's taking notes, sending out emails, giving notes to actors on the side, taking actors in another room and working with them on something, calling people, taking over rehearsal when the director wants to go do something else, has a meeting, wants to work with somebody, etc. I can stop there.
You're doing great. If you have anything you need to wrap up, that's fine. A couple minutes.
You have a couple questions. You want to take some questions?
I didn't talk about. Sure.
So we have a question that says, when you're running out of time, what decisions do you make on what to work on and what to let go?
Obviously, there's a priority of scenes and or actors in terms of how they fit into the total picture. If, like I mentioned, those 4 most important points: inciting incident, crisis, conflict. If we're having trouble with the scene that is the conflict of climax of the play, that would obviously trump most other scenes in the play if it needs work. Sometimes it's a matter of trying to balance. Let me mention that, for instance. My father taught me this so importantly, and it always kind of was one of the detriments of the Kirk players. I often asked him, why did you cast that person? Or why did you spend so much time with that person and they're a weak actor? You didn't give me a damn note for 6 weeks of rehearsal. He goes, you are doing fine. They needed the work. I'd rather have 8 or 9 of you coming in at a B or a C than have 2 or 3 A's and some F's and D's in the cast. So he obviously, his choice was to make sure that everybody was of a higher average when you looked at the show, than to make Jeff, who's doing good work, great, and let somebody else who's struggling continue to struggle.
We have one more question here. Outside of assistant directing, what can a person do to prepare to be a director?
Stage management is second best, because you're going to sit at table. That's what it's all about. Sit at table. Hear what the director's sharing. I know I try, and most directors I think try, to not just give the notes down to the AD, but take the time to lean down and say, hey, stage manager, ASM, here I'm doing this because we need to look at this because, so that everybody learns. I know that coming from a high school environment, I look for teaching moments for not just the actors, but the cast, not the staff, and also techies and designers and stuff.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have.
Was there anything else you wanted to wrap up with, Les? Or are you good?
I have one concept to throw at you that might only take a minute. When I talk about pre-blocking and thinking about it ahead of time, getting it done ahead of time, and giving it to the actors, a lot of those kind of choices depend on what style of director you are. There's 2 styles, autocratic and democratic. Just like the words, autocratic is the director that makes all their decisions themselves, and they take very little input from the other people. They don't take much input from the actors. They tell the actors what they want. Now, democratic are the people that listen to everybody's ideas, ask, hey, what do you think here? Mr. What do you think about this reference to your father in this monologue? Neither one is right. They're both great as long as they're good. Very few people are entirely autocratic or entirely democratic. Most directors fall somewhere in the middle or somewhere side to side. But there's advantages to both. If I said earlier, the number one function of the director is to unify all elements, then an autocratic director who doesn't take input and does every decision making. That's what I want, a green costume. I want that high set for this. I want this sound effect. I want that. If that director is making most of the decisions, they're going to have a pretty tight, unified production. But are people going to feel as good about working with them? You've heard stories about people in Hollywood who think that this director's kind of a jerk in the way he treats everybody, but they'll die to work with them because they're good. Democratic directors can be just as good. They might get some great ideas brainstorming that they didn't have themselves. And they certainly make people feel good about working with them because everybody feels like they had a say in things. But you can see the danger. God forbid I spend too much time going into my actor group and going, yeah, you guys, how do you feel this should go? Do you want to move here? Do you feel like standing? Where do you feel like crossing in the middle of this monologue? Let's try a couple different. Shit, you got to get things done. But, like I'm saying, neither one is right, neither one is wrong. They're just different styles. I am much more autocratic if I don't have any time. If I don't have time, no offense, team, I can't ask your opinion that much. If I'm working with a weaker cast, I'm more autocratic. They don't have their own ideas as much. When I've got a time and a cast I think are experienced, I'd rather relax and be more democratic. When I came out of college, I was hardcore autocratic. Now I'm an old softy and I'm much more democratic. Both are good.
That's awesome. Thank you, Les. That